Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome to part 2 of my Through the Ages series on the Bard class. In the last video, I took a look at the Bard from the 1st edition and 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbooks. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the 3rd edition versions of the Bard class. So we're going to be taking a look at 3.0, 3.5, as well as Pathfinder 1st edition, which even though it's technically its own product line, is based very heavily off of the 3rd edition open gaming license, and a lot of people refer to Pathfinder 1st edition as D&D version 3.75 instead of 3.5. So let's just dive right into it, shall we? We're going to start off with the 3.0 Player's Handbook, and this is what the 3.0 one looks like. They were designed to mimic sort of like actual leather-bound tomes. And it's a bit more plain in the design. It's still a really cool design for the books, and I actually kind of like this aesthetic over just the artwork. You know, there's a point in time which I really appreciated the artwork covers, but sometimes going back and looking at these 3rd edition books and how they actually had like a physical object that they would create and then photograph to use for the pictures is, again, just really cool. Again, also, if you take a look at the gem, the red gem here, it may not show up super well on camera, but if you take a look, you can actually make out in the reflection what looks like the individual. It is a glossy surface, so it's kind of hard to get it to. But you can actually see what looks like a person taking the picture of it there. So this was actually a physical object that they had, which was really cool. Anyway, that's a little bit of trivia, but let's get into the actual Bard class. I'm procrastinating just a little bit, only because in 3rd edition, all the character classes had like an iconic character artwork that they used, and most of them were kind of this cartoonish style like we have for Kruskir, or for Jozan, or for like Ember, for like Regdar and Tordek, which we've got there, sort of the different classes. But for the 3rd edition Bard, we had Devis, and I apologize up front. This might end up haunting your nightmares. I don't know, there's just something about the Devis artwork that just feels really unsettling. I don't know if it's like the smirk, the kind of sassy pose. There's just something off-putting about him. So we're just going to flip this over, and we're not going to consult the next page until we absolutely have to. So let's just take a look at the Bard here. So the 3rd edition Bard, we get this game information here. They have D6 for hit dice, so they are similar to a rogue. In 2nd edition AD&D, they were grouped in with the rogue class, and then you had the subclasses of the thief and the bard. In 3rd edition, the thief and the rogue are basically the same thing. They're just called rogue now, but you still have the bard, which shares a lot of similarities with the rogue class. So we got our D6 for hit dice, which again is the same hit dice that the thief gets, or the rogue gets. Alignment restrictions, they are required to be of a non-lawful alignment. So over here it says bards are wanderers, guided by whim and intuition rather than by tradition and law. The spontaneous talent, magic, and lifestyle of the bard are incompatible with a lawful alignment. So alignment restrictions were still a thing. They were a little bit more lax for the most part, but the bard could be any neutral alignment or any chaotic alignment, as long as they didn't have lawful in their alignment. So they could be neutral good, they could be neutral evil, they could be true neutral, they could be chaotic good, or they could technically be chaotic evil. I'm not quite sure what a chaotic evil bard would really be like, but regardless. We also have their class skill list. So let's just actually see if I can find... Yeah, there's the chart there. So the large circles indicate skills that you can take as class skills in 3rd edition. A class skill just means that if you put a rank into it, 1 rank equals +1 bonus in the skill. You buy it at 1-to-1. You can have a maximum number of ranks in any class skill equal to your level +3. So at 1st level, you can have up to 4 ranks in a skill. The ones that are the smaller circles are considered to be cross-class skills. So they have half the number of ranks that you can put into them maximum, but each rank also costs 2 points. So not only can you only get At first level, you can only have 2 ranks in a cross-class skill, but it still costs you 4 skill points to earn those 2 ranks, and cross-class skills in 3rd edition were kind of garbage. But because you can see, they have a huge selection of class and cross-class skills. I think they have the highest number of class skills in the game. They only have they've only got one skill here that's not available to them, which has the X through it. And for some reason, that's Read Lips. I don't know why the Bard doesn't have Read Lips as a skill that they can take. Only the Rogue, or only the Rogue has that particular. Oh, sorry, the Rogue. Read Lips. Yeah, only the Rogue has that skill available to them. Seems like something that a Bard might find useful, especially with, how sound and words and stuff like that can play such a big role in their class. But regardless, it is what it is. So they have a massive list of class skills, but they have a mediocre number of skill points that they actually earn. So the Bard gets 4 plus their intelligence modifier for their skill points, which sounds all right, but if you look at the Rogue class, they get double that. So they get 8 plus their intelligence modifier. So for a class that's sort of dependent on, having a large array of class skills, the actual amount of skill points that they get to assign to those is pretty underwhelming, I have to say. But there you go. So that's that information. Their weapon and armor proficiency, they are proficient with all simple weapons, and then they can choose one from the following list that they'll also be proficient in. So they can be proficient in all simple weapons, as well as one of the following: longbow, composite longbow, longsword, rapier, sap, short composite bow, short sword, short bow, or the whip. Of that list, honestly, rapier's probably the better choice to take, just because you can take weapon finesse with it, unlike things like the longsword. It has a good critical threat range as well, so that's probably the one that you'd want to take, I guess. As far as armor is concerned, they can wear any light and medium armor, and they are proficient with shields, which is interesting. I don't think they were proficient with shields in 2nd edition AD&D. However, they will suffer armor check penalties to certain skills depending on how heavy the armor is that they're wearing. They also will suffer a % chance for spell failure. So in 3rd edition, instead of spellcasters, particularly arcane spellcasters, casting spells in armor just automatically failing like they did in previous editions, in this edition, they just give you a % chance that you have to roll, and if you roll that percentage number or less, then you fail to cast the spell, the slot's burned up, but if you roll above it, then you're good to go. So, for example, if a suit of armor had a 15% spell failure chance, anytime the Bard cast a spell while wearing it, they would have to roll a percentile, and as long as they get 16 or above on the D100, then they are good to go. So it's actually one of the better changes that I think 3rd edition implemented, was actually having spell failure chances instead of it just automatically not working. As far as their spells go, since we'll segue from the chance to fail to cast a spell into the spell information, Bards were kind of interesting in that they were a class that cast their spells spontaneously now in 3rd edition. So unlike the 2nd edition AD&D Bard that had a spell book and that they had to memorize and prepare their spells the same way that a wizard did, they now function more like a sorcerer in that they know a certain number of spells and they can use their spell slots however they wish with the spells of the corresponding levels. The Bard begins play knowing 4 0-level spells, as well as having 2 0-level spell slots. So the Bard is one of those cases where they know more spells, and they have more spells in the repertoire than they actually have the spell slots to cast with those spells. The Sorcerer is a little bit different. Except for 0-level spells, the Sorcerer has more spell slots than they have spells in their repertoire, so they should, get better usage of all of their spells, whereas the Bards have a lot of tools in the chest, but they don't necessarily get to take them out as often. In fact, the Bard doesn't get any 0-level or any 1st-level spells until 3rd level, so not even... 2nd level. So at second level, they gain a 0 in their first level spells. That means that they don't gain any specifically from the class. However, if their charisma is a certain point, then they will gain bonus spell slots. So a bard with a 16 charisma, for example, at first level, or at second level, I should say, they would gain 1 bonus spell. So they would have 3 0-level spell slots and 1 first level spell slot that they could use. At second level is where they gain their first actual spell slot from the class, and they can progress from 0-level spells all the way up to 6-level spells. So not a full-on spellcaster like they would be in later editions, but they still get some things that they can do there. As far as other game information goes, they have the moderate attack bonus, so they get the same attack bonus as the rogue class, as the monk, as the druid, and the cleric. So it's sort of the middle ground between the wizard and sorcerer's abysmal attack bonuses and the fighter, paladin, ranger, and barbarian's excellent attack bonuses. They also have good saving throw progression for their reflex and their wisdom. So they actually get 2 of their 3 saving throws, get the good progression. Only their fortitudes at first level starts with a +0 bonus. And it's typically whatever their reflex and will save bonuses are, they typically have about half of that for their fortitude. All right, so up next, we're going to take a look at the special abilities that they get as they progress through the levels. And as you can see, it's kind of lacking in that it's 2 things, bardic music and bardic knowledge. Also, I apologize, there is a heavy wind and rainstorm going on right now, so you might be hearing that in the background. Not much I can do about it. Oh, that is really coming down. All right, let's just pull this off like a band-aid. So here's Devis. But here we have bardic music. So the way the bardic music works in 3rd edition is they get a number of uses of their music equal to once per day for each level in the bard class that they have. So at first level, they get 1 use of bardic music, and then at 20th level, they would have 20 uses of it. And for each level in between, it's the corresponding number. The different types of abilities that they can use with the bardic music is dependent on the number of ranks that they have in the perform skill. Now, when it's bardic music, it doesn't necessarily have to be like music. It doesn't necessarily have to be them playing like the lute or the drums. It could be things like them reciting poetry, or doing sort of like a song and dance routine. There's different things that can be incorporated into it. It's just called bardic music for the sake of making it, I guess, easy to have a terminology for. So, starting off at the beginning of the game, they have the ability to use Counter Song and Inspire Courage, but they have to have a minimum of 3 ranks in the Perform skill. Again, at first level, you can have up to 4 ranks in a class skill, which Perform obviously is for the Bard, so it's not that big of an issue here. Inspire Courage allows the Bard to provide some bonuses to nearby allies, giving them a +2 morale bonus to saving throws against charm and fear effects, as well as a +1 morale bonus to attack and weapon damage rolls. Inspire Courage is supernatural, mind affecting, and it lasts for the duration of while the bard's performing the music, and I think it lasts for another 5 rounds after that. Yeah. So it lasts for a few more rounds after that. Then the bard can also use Counter Song. So a bard with 3 or more ranks to perform can use his or her music or poetics to counter magical effects that depend on sound. This is an ability that they also had in 2nd edition AD&D as well. So they can counter things that use basically like words or sounds as part of like the major component of their spell casting. Simple verbal components for arcane spells wouldn't really fall under the category, but spells such as Sound Burst or Command, you can use the Counter Song ability to negate those. So it's a bit nebulous what it actually works towards. But there are things that require like actual like sustained verbal or like sound-based effects to go off. So again, not just a few short like verbal components to a spell casting, but say if the spell allows you to command somebody to do something, well, the counter song can actually counter that. They can keep it going for, what is the number of rounds here? They can keep Countersong going for 10 rounds, and again, it's a supernatural ability. They also get the ability, if they have 3 or more ranks to perform, to fascinate a creature. So it's single target, but they will be fascinated. It's simply, or basically as per the spell. So they'll kind of just become transfixed on what you're doing. They won't become aggressive or anything like that, but the effect can be broken if they take like any damage. Once you complete the song, I think it lasts for another round per level after that. But yeah, so it's sort of like it's kind of like it replaces the ability to charm. It just sort of renders them more or less catatonic for the duration of the effect. Okay, so once they get up to 6 or more ranks of perform, they can use Inspire Competence, which grants the person that you're targeting a +2 competence bonus on his skill checks in the particular skill, as long as they continue to hear the bard's music. Now, this does not work with the stealth skill. The Order of the Stick comic famously had the bard trying to use Inspire Competence, singing a song to help somebody be sneaky, which just sort of, again, defeats the purpose. But yeah, so that's basically a +2 bonus they can apply to an ally's skill checks, and they can maintain the effect for up to 2 minutes. If they have 9 or more ranks in Perform, then they can use the Suggestion spell, but they can only use it on a target that they've already fascinated. So if you fascinate someone, you can then sort of incorporate a subtle suggestion into your performance, which works as a suggestion spell, which is basically a simple command that if the person fails their save against it, then they'll perform the action. However, it can't lead to them committing any sort of like self-harm. For example, you can't use suggestion to get them to fall on their weapon, but you could use suggestion to get them to either stow their weapon or to drop it at their feet. You could use suggestion to get them to walk away. You could use suggestion to get them to like drop any other like handheld item. So there are certain things along those lines that you can use with it. It doesn't use an extra. It doesn't take an extra use of your bardic music. So unlike the other ones, which would take away from the number of bard music abilities that you would have based on your level, this one doesn't actually take an additional use, but again, it has to be against the target that you've already fascinated. And then finally, you get the Inspire Greatness. So a bard with 12 or more ranks in Perform can use a song or poetics to inspire greatness in another creature, granting extra fighting capability for every 3 levels the bard attains. Beyond 9th, they can inspire 1 additional creature. So it's one of the few abilities that actually kind of scales. It's not the effect that scales, and typically with the bard stuff in 3.0, it's not the bonuses that scale, but you can get an increasing number of targets that you can apply the effects to as you progress. But essentially what it does is it gives them +2 hit dice as temporary hit points. So temporary hit points are always used first, and this actually grants you D10s, which is one of the highest hit dice that you can get. So you would roll 2d10. You get to add your con modifier to both of those rolls. So if you had a +2 in your constitution, for example, you would roll 2d10 +4, and that would be your temporary hit points. Again, those get used first, and after the duration of the effect wears off, then they would just disappear. You also get a +2 competence bonus on attack rolls, a +1 competence bonus on fortitude saving throws, and yeah, so I already mentioned that you can apply the Constitution there. So that's sort of the main bardic abilities there. So you can give essentially a bonus to certain saving throws, as well as a +1 bonus to attacks and damage rolls. You can fascinate a target enemy or some enemies depending on your level. If you have someone that is fascinated by your ability, you can cast Suggestion on them for free. As long as they failed against your Fascinate ability. You can also grant a +2 competence bonus on certain skill checks for a duration of up to 2 minutes, and you've got the Inspire Greatness. The other ability that bards get is effectively the Bardic Knowledge, and this just allows you, so I'll just read the ability here. So it says a bard picks up a lot of stray knowledge while wandering the land and learning stories from other bards. A bard may make a special bardic knowledge check with a bonus equal to his level plus intelligence modifier. So it doesn't rely on a skill, it's just your level plus your intelligence. And you could basically recall certain types of knowledge, and it gives you the examples of like what you get for the DC and what information that you get from that. So it's also cumulative. So if you got a 20, for example, you'd know the common information as well as the uncommon, things like that. So it just basically allows you to know certain things. So let's just take a look at what you can actually get for them. So for common knowledge, DC 10, so it's common knowledge known by at least a substantial minority of the local population. Examples are a local mayor's reputation for drinking, common legends about powerful place or mystery. Uncommon but available, so DC 20, known only by a few people in the area. So an example could be a local priest's shady past, legends about a powerful magic item. DC 25 is obscure, known by a few, and hard to come by bits of information. An example could be a knight's family history, legends about a minor place. And then for 30, you have extremely obscure, known by very few, possibly forgotten by most who once knew it, possibly known only by those who don't understand the significance of the knowledge. And an example is a mighty wizard's childhood nickname, the history of a petty magic item. So yeah, so that's essentially the bard class. Now, the one thing I do also want to take a quick moment to talk about is their spell casting. We took a look at their charts, which is, again, not necessarily the greatest. They begin play with 2 0-level spell slots, and they don't gain the potential for a bonus spell until 2nd level. Now, in 2nd edition AD&D, bards also didn't begin 1st level with the ability to cast spells. They got their first spell slot at 2nd level. But with this one, it's not even a spell slot. It's literally dependent on your attributes, granting you bonus, although you're probably going to have a pretty good charisma because it's one of your primary abilities. But yeah, so we got that. But one of the big things about their spells or their spell selection, which we'll get to the chart here in a second. I'm not going to go through every single spell that the bard gets, but let's just say that their spell selection kind of sucks. So in 3.0, we've got their different cantrips, and pretty much 99% of bard spells are meant to either boost a player character, like a party member or party members, to provide penalties to enemies or attacking creatures, or have certain other like minor effects that can impact combat through means other than like actually applying damage. They do get the ability to cure light wounds, so they do gain access to curative magic in 3.0, but they don't gain the opposite of that, which is the inflict spell, which like clerics and druids and pretty much any other class that gets the cure spell usually gets the inflict version to go along with it. Unfortunately, they don't get that. So 99% of what a bard can do for their spells is sort of like support stuff. So you can increase attributes, you can increase like movement speed, provide bonuses on certain attacks, or you could provide penalties, adverse effects against certain enemy targets, but not a lot of like actual offensive power behind the bard spells. In fact, in 3.0, the number of spells that bards have that actually deal hit point damage is a staggering over 6 levels of spell progression, 7 if you include 0 level. Over all of those various levels of spells, they have a grand total of 2 spells in the player's handbook that deals hit point damage. And unlike most damage dealing spells in 3rd edition, none of these actually increase or scale up with the level of the caster. So let's just take a look at 2nd level. The bard gets the Sound Burst ability, or a spell that they could choose. So it deals 1d8 sonic damage to subjects, so it's sort of an area effect, and a chance to stun them. So that's 1d8. It's only going to be 1d8. It's never going to change. When you compare it to something like the Burning Hand spell that a 1st level wizard could get, which deals 1d4 damage at 1st level, but it deals an extra d4 damage per level, all the way up to a maximum of 5d4 at 5th level. So the Bard damage dealing spell for second level does not scale. Their next damage dealing spell comes in at fourth level, and it is the Shout spell, which deafens all within a cone and deals 2d6 damage. So the positive is that all of the Bard's damage dealing spells are area of effects. The downside is that there's only 2 of them. And again, it's just 2d6 damage. It does not change. Oh, sorry, they get 3. I'm sorry. They actually get 3 damage dealing spells. I missed one when I was reading through it earlier. So they get 3. So I apologize. So 2 of the 3 are area of effect, and they don't scale with level at all. At 5th level, they do get the spell Nightmare, which sends vision dealing 1d10 damage and fatiguing the target. So it's a single target for that one. I'm sorry I missed it when I was reading up earlier today. So yeah, they get 3, not 2, but the one that they have that's not area effect is, again, it's only a single d10. And the way that you know that is because all the other spells that actually deal damage, they will show you, for example, inflict wounds, inflict critical wounds here for a 4th level cleric. Touch is 4d8 plus 1 per level damage. Things like the burning hands that I mentioned earlier for the sorcerer and wizard. Where are we here? Burning hands, 1d4 damage per level. So it will tell you in these minor descriptions if it scales up. So the Bard gets 3 spells that deal damage, 2 of which are area of effects, 1 of which is single target. And none of them actually scale up with levels. So a bit, again, kind of a letdown. It's great if you are someone who likes to play backup or likes to be more of a support person. Like, you don't necessarily want to be the focus, like dealing the most damage or being the best healer in the party. Or dealing super high amounts of damage with your spells. If you're okay just increasing your party members' abilities or detracting from enemies' abilities, then the Bard spells aren't necessarily bad. But if you're looking for the ability to be able to deal some decent amounts of damage with your spells in combat, you're not going to get that here. In fact, the 5th level spell, only dealing a single d10, honestly feels kind of weak. It's not even a d10 per level. I am going to flip to the actual spell description just to see, just in the hopes that they forgot to incorporate that into the description, but I don't think that they did. So let's just see here. Nope, it is 1d10 points of damage, and that is all it is and all it will ever be. So yeah, so that is the 3.0 Bard. Honestly, pretty weak overall, I have to say. So that was 3.0 though. 3.0 was around for 3 years, and after about 2 years, Wizards of the Coast realized that they had to do some work. They needed to modify some things. They needed to update and change some things to make it more playable. So in 2003, we switched from 3.0 to the reason we have to call it 3.0 now, because they released D&D version 3.5, and it will say 3.5 on the front cover here. Now, this is the 2012 re-release of the Player's Handbook, so it looks a little bit different than the 2003 version, but that's just the one that I had handy on my shelf, so that's the one that we're going to use here. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the Bard class. All right, so here we have the 3rd edition or 3.5 Bard. First of all, right off the bat, we got rid of Devis. He does appear later in the 3.5 Player's Handbook in the character description section, so when you're getting around alignment descriptions, stuff like that, Devis will be there to terrify your dreams. But here we have Gimbal, the Gnome Bard. One of the things that also changed from 3rd edition to 3.5 was the fact that the Gnome class went from having Illusionist as their favorite class, which was actually a specialist version of the Wizard. It wasn't its own standalone class. They got switched to having their favorite class as being Bard, which means that Devis is gone and we have Gimbal here as the iconic 3.5 Bard. So let's see what we got here for some of the game information. So again, charisma is their primary ability. We're going to be coming back to this page here in a moment, but let's just flip over to see what we got here. So alignment's still the same. So the alignment restriction for them being non-lawful still carries over into 3.5, and I wasn't really expecting that to change necessarily. They still get D6s for hit dice. They still have like a really good amount of class skills that they can choose from. However, smart smart decision made with 3.5 was to have bards and some other classes get 6 skill points per level plus their intelligence modifier, as opposed to 4, which they had before. So while they don't have as many skills as a rogue does, they get just a couple points less per level, and they still have like the second highest amount of skill points that you can get in the game. So they increase the number of skill points that they get, which is awesome. I'm glad that they made that decision. As far as weapon armor proficiency, they're proficient with all simple weapons, plus the longsword, sap, rapier, short sword, short bow, and whip. So instead of them having to choose one of those options, they are now proficient with all simple weapons plus that entire list. Conspicuous by their absence from that list is the composite bows. Now, composite bows allowed you to add part of your strength modifier based on the strength rating of the bow to your ranged attacks. So that was removed, but they do get proficiency with the short bow, as well as, I think it's just the short bow actually. I don't think they get the long bow anymore. But yeah, so they don't get composite bows or the long bow, but they are proficient with the short sword, sap, rapier, longsword, short bow, and the whip. So the overall, right away, more skills, more skill points that they can earn, as well as better weapon proficiency. As far as armor is concerned, it's the same thing. They are proficient with light armor. Oh, actually, they changed their proficiencies. They're no longer proficient with medium armor. They're proficient with light armor and shields. So they took away the heavy armor or the medium armor proficiency that they had in 3.0. But overall, again, because you still suffer things like spell failure chance with armor on, it makes sense that they would sort of shy away from the heavier armors to begin with. So again, I'm fine with that. I think that's a decent compromise, especially for the more skill points and the better selection of weapons that they can utilize. All right, so let's go back to the chart here for a second. So again, the saving throw bonuses are the same. The attack bonuses are the same. Their spell progression, unfortunately, is still the same in that they don't gain any first level spells potentially until second level, but it is what it is. The number of spells they know is the same, so their spellcasting stuff really hasn't changed at all. But we actually see some more things on the special section on their progression chart. So we've got Bardic Music, Bardic Knowledge, Countersong, Fascinate, and Inspire Courage. So Bardic Music is, Countersong, Fascinate, and Inspire Courage. They're all still considered to be part of the Bardic Music ability. So your Bardic Music is still a number of uses equal to your level. But these are the different ones that they get. So again, at first level, you can get Countersong, Fascinate, and Inspire Courage. There are still requirements for ranks in the Perform skill. So with Bardic Music, for example, they need 3 ranks to Perform. For Countersong, which works pretty much the same way as it did before. With Fascinate, they need 3 ranks, as well as their Inspire Courage. So they still need their ranks in the Perform skill. But overall, I like the fact that they put the levels that you can gain access to the various abilities granted by Bardic Music. I'm glad that they actually put that in there. And there's a couple new things that were also added in here. So we have things like Song of Freedom was introduced here in 3.5. You also have Mass Suggestion. So we'll look at those abilities here in a moment. But one of my favorite things is the fact that Inspire Courage actually scales now. So Inspire Courage still gives you the +1 morale bonus against saving throws for charm and fear effects, as well as +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls. But at 8th level and at 14th and at 20th, you actually gain an increasing number. So instead of it always just being that +1 bonus, As you go up in level, you can eventually get +2, 3, or 4 granted with that ability, which is really cool. Inspire Greatness is the same one that we had before. You gain access to it at 9th level. Have to have 12 ranks and perform. And it gives them the 2 bonus hit dice at d10s, the +2 competence bonus on attack rolls, and the fortitude saving throws. So that doesn't scale, but it's still there. Song of Freedom. So at 12th level, a bard with 15 or more ranks to perform can use their magic or poetics to create an equivalent to the Break Enchantment spell. Using this ability requires 1 minute of uninterrupted concentration in music, and it functions on a single target within 30 feet. A bard can't use Song of Freedom on himself. So this can allow you to counter things like the Dominate ability or charms or things like that. So again, it's just a nice little ability that was thrown in with the 3.5 bard. Inspire Heroics. I think this is actually a new one as well. So at 15th level with 18 ranks or more in the Perform skill, you can use your music or poetics to inspire tremendous heroism in himself or a willing ally within 30 feet, allowing that creature to fight bravely even against overwhelming odds. For every 3 bard levels the character attains beyond 15th, which is basically just 18th if you're not doing epic levels, he can inspire heroics on 1 additional creature. To inspire heroics, a bard must sing, and an ally must be able to hear the bard for a full round. A creature so inspired gains a +4 morale bonus on saving throws, so that's all saving throws, and a +4 dodge bonus to armor class. So that's actually a really good ability as well, because most types of bonuses in 3rd edition, if they share the same name, you only get the better of the 2. So for example, a competence bonus, if you get 2 different things that would grant you a competence bonus, like say Inspire Courage and Inspire Greatness, for example, they both provide a competence bonus to attack rolls. You would only get the greater of those 2 abilities. But the dodge bonus, anything that grants you a dodge bonus stacks. So if you have like the dodge feat, for example, grants you a dodge bonus to your armor class. In 3rd edition, 3.5 is against a single target, but it's a +1 bonus, it's a dodge bonus, and this would actually stack with that to give you a +5 if you're using that particular feat. Also, some of the races, like I think the dwarf gets a +4 racial dodge bonus against giants. So if you were a dwarf fighting a giant and your bard used Inspire Heroics on you, you would get a +8 bonus, dodge bonus to armor class. So that's actually, again, a really good ability. And then they get their Mass Suggestion, which functions the same as the Suggestion ability. However, it can just target a number of multiple creatures simultaneously. So that's sort of the differences there. So they added a few new abilities to the bardic music, which made it, halfway decent. I love the fact that your Inspire Courage, or Competence, is it? Or I think it's Inspire Courage. The fact that Inspire Courage actually scales with your level is also really great. The only other thing to really talk about with the 3.5 Bard is going to be their spells. And honestly, not a whole lot has really changed here either. We do have more spells available to the Bard on like the spell list than we had before, but they're still somewhat lacking in the ability to actually affect combat through like damage. They still get a ton of spells that can buff other player characters in the party or allies of the Bard or the Bard himself. There's also all kinds of spells that hamper enemies. They can like blind them, deafen them, stun them, things along those lines. But as far as like actual damage dealing spells go, again, we're pretty limited here. Let's just take a look. So at 1st level, none of their spells actually deal any sort of damage whatsoever, which kind of sucks. At 2nd level, we still have the Sound Burst, which deals 1d8 sonic. So again, it's an area effect, but it does not scale with level. It also is only a single d8. At 3rd level, they don't gain any damage-dealing spells from what I can see here, but again, lots of spells that can affect enemies or players, or allies, I guess, adversely for the allies, adversely for the enemies, and will actually help out the allies. At 4th level, they get their Shout spell, which deals 5d6 sonic now. So the shout spell only, I think it only dealt, I think it was 2d8 or 2d6 in 3.0. So that one actually improved. It's still static. It's still a set amount of damage that doesn't increase or scale, but it is more damage. So that one definitely got improved. They also add the ability to have what's called shadow spells. So they gain Shadow Conjuration, which allows you to mimic the effects of a 4th level or lower conjuration spell, some of which can deal damage. The downside is that only 20% of the damage or of the effect is considered to be real. So it is like an illusion spell that, you know, can partially affect things. Not as good, but it's still something. So again, if there is some damage that is dealt by some of these spells, you still deal a percentage of it, which is better than nothing, I have to say. At 4th or 5th level, they get the Shadow Evocation spell. So Evocation are your big sources of damage dealing, like Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Magic Missile, I think, is Evocation as well. So you get all those spells that you can mimic, a 5th level or lower, but again, only 20% of it is real. So if you, if a spell did like, if a spell did 5 damage, then only 1 point of that would be real. Again, it's unfortunate. It's kind of crummy, but at the same time, it still allows them to utilize some other spells to mimic them, and it can still have a partial effect. Not the greatest, but still, it's better than nothing. So I do appreciate the fact that they actually end up gaining that. And then at 6th level, we have doesn't look like much here. There's Sympathetic Vibration, which deals damage to structures, but not actual creatures. I thought we had like a greater shout, but I think I might be confusing that with something else. So again, like their spell casting, their spells got better for the most part. Like the few damage dealing options that they have improved, with the exception of the sound bursts that they get at 2nd level. So they definitely got a little bit better. They do have a larger list of spells that they can choose from, which is good. So they have a bit more versatility as far as that goes. But they're still, again, very much relegated to a supporting role. And that's really kind of what the design philosophy behind the 3rd edition Bard was. I remember doing research for previous videos, and there were like rumors, or there was sort of this idea sort of kicking around Wizards of the Coast that the Bard class might have been better served being switched from a player character class and becoming an NPC class. Because in 3rd edition and 3.5, you had NPC classes which had abilities that are similar to the player character classes, but they were generally a far weaker version. So instead of being a fighter with all the bonus feats and stuff like that, you could play a warrior as an NPC. The warrior had d8s for hit dice instead of d10s. They didn't gain the bonus feats, but they did have like the decent attack progression. For spell casting, you had the adept, which could choose some spells from, which had just a set number of spells or specific spells they could choose from, but they were drawn from any particular spell list. So they might have some cleric spells with some wizard spells or some druid stuff. They were kind of meant to be like the shaman type of character, or like a mystic type of thing. So there were actual, you know, discussions, or at least rumors of discussions, that the Bard class really felt more like it should have been one of those NPC classes, because it does a really good job of filling the void left by not choosing one of the other like core types of classes. But it's one of those things that it can do just about anything, but it cannot do anything better than any of the other classes. It's like the Jack of all trades, master of none really applies to the 3rd edition Bard, like in a major way. You know, they get a decent ability to attack. You know, they get a decent weapon selection, okay armor selection, but they'll never attack as good as a fighter. They'll never have like the sneak attack of a Bard. They've got a decent amount of skills, but they're not proficient in like they don't have as many skills as, again, a rogue does. They can do spell casting, and they can cast spells that would appear for like wizards or clerics on their list, but they're not as good at healing as a cleric would be, for example, and they're definitely not as good at you know, combat spells as a wizard or sorcerer would be. So it's just kind of this weird, like, role where I don't know very many people that really played or genuinely wanted to play a bard in 3rd edition or 3.5 because you were really stuck in that support role. It seems like the kind of thing, honestly, looking at it today, if I were to play in a 3.5 game and I couldn't commit to showing up to every single session, the Bard is probably what I would play. It's nice to have. They can do some really okay things, but if the character's not there, I don't think the group necessarily suffers for it the way that they would if the person playing their cleric couldn't show, for example, or the person playing their fighter or rogue couldn't show up. So it's just sort of this weird region for the bard in 3.5 and 3.0 D&D. But we're not quite done here because we have one more version of a D20 role-playing game that is heavily follows the format and the structure of 3rd edition D&D, and that is Pathfinder 1st edition. In the past, with the Barbarian video, I actually did Pathfinder as its own separate entry, but I think I'm going to group it in with this one in this video because I think it just makes sense. Again, Pathfinder 1st edition, a lot of people kind of refer to it as like the D&D 3.75 edition. It was sort of, it was an improvement on 3.5, but it wasn't as drastic a departure from 3rd edition as 4th edition D&D was. So it was kind of like a compromise role-playing game. But it was an excellent system in of itself. Paizo did a really great job with it, and they really did make the Pathfinder rules their own. And they did make it feel like a distinct version of a role-playing game. It didn't just feel like it was derivative. They really made it their own, and they did an excellent job with it. But let's take a look at the Bard class here. So we'll just go through the listing of classes, and we're at the Bard. Okay, so right off the bat, a few things that I really like about the Bard class in Pathfinder that make it better than the Bard class even in 3.5. Their hit dice has been increased to a D8, so they no longer have the D6 that like a rogue would have. So even though they're not as good as like again a fighter, they have that D8, which is kind of like the average or middle ground hit dice that a lot of classes sort of defaulted to. And if you look no further than 5th edition D&D these days to see how many classes use the D8. So it was really cool to see them get the D8 hit dice here as well. I actually think that they got rid of the D4 for the Wizard and Sorcerer, so I think Wizard and Sorcerer's got a D6, which bumped up the Rogue and the Bard because they didn't want the Bard and the Rogue having the same hit dice as the Wizard. Whatever, that's fine. I'm still glad that they get a D8 now, so they're a little bit hardier. They can stick around a little bit more. Proficiencies. Oh, alignment. They can be any alignment now. The justification for them not being able to be lawful just because they wander wasn't really the best description or the best justification for an alignment restriction. It was one of the weaker ones. For example, like the Barbarian not being able to be lawful made sense because they fly into these rages. They lose absolute control of themselves. They don't, they have their own sort of society, but they're not like, they don't conform to what you might consider to be like more civilized society sort of thing. So they justified the alignment restriction for a class like the Barbarian a lot better. So here they can just be any alignment, which is great. They still get their 6+ intelligence modifier for skill points, which is awesome. Armor and weapon proficiency, they are proficient with all simple weapons, plus the longsword, rapier, sap, short sword, short bow, and whip. So the same thing that we had before. They are proficient with light armor and shields. A bard can cast bard spells while wearing light armor and use a shield without incurring the normal arcane spell failure chance. So, the bard in this version of the game, they can cast a spell without worrying about failing based on if they're using stuff they get as a default proficiencies from like first level. So if they took like the medium arm proficiency feat later, that wouldn't apply because I think it says specifically that it has to be wearing light armor, but it's still really cool that they finally dropped the spell failure chance. And that's the reason that they got rid of the medium armor from 3.0 to 3.5 was because of the spell failure chance. But, again, you have a class that's one of their major features that they might just not be able to use because they're taking advantage of another one of their proficiencies. When I get to the Ranger class from 3.0, we'll talk about like armor proficiencies and those proficiencies screwing up their own other class features, but that's a story for another day. All right, so for spells, they get the arcane spells. They still cast them spontaneously. We'll take a look at their progression here in a second. Bardic Knowledge, so Bard adds half his class on all the knowledge skill checks. So instead of it being a separate check, which is a d20 plus your level, you gain an extra bonus on all knowledge skills equal to half your level. And I believe that's rounded down because most things do round down. But yeah, so that's actually, so if you were at 10th level Bard using a knowledge skill, you get a +5 bonus for your level, which again is really, really cool. Bardic Performance, so this is, I think, part of like the Bardic music. We'll take a look at that in a second here. Let's see, a Bard is trained to use a perform skill to create magical effects on those around them, including himself if desired. He can use the ability for a number of rounds per day equal to 4 plus his charisma modifier. At each level after first, the Bard can, the Bard can use Bardic Performance an additional number of rounds. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at this from a distance, and it's kind of small print. So for each level above first, they can add an extra 2 rounds per day to that. So instead of it being just a set number of times equal to your level, it's just a set number of rounds. It's kind of what they did with the Barbarian Rage as well. They kind of moved away from the times per day aspect of character classes, and instead looked at like just total number of rounds per day. So they start with 4 rounds per day plus their charisma modifier, and then every level after first, they add an additional 2 rounds. Sorry that took me a second to read, because I'm sitting back and it is small text. All right, so here we've got the Bard class chart. So one of the things, again, that stands out immediately is the fact that there's no 0 level spells on here, and that's because in Pathfinder, 0 level spells are referred to as cantrips or orisons for like actually I think they're just called cantrips. But the 0 level spells, they have like a certain number that they can learn or that they know, but you can use them an unlimited number of times per day. So you're no longer limited to just 2 0 level spells at first level. As a Bard in Pathfinder, you can use your 0 level spells as many times as you want. And they also start with 1 first level spell. So they can actually have first level spell slots at first level, finally. All right, so they get some other abilities here. So we got like Countersong, Fascinate, Inspire Courage. Inspire Courage works pretty much the same way. Their Inspire Competence also works the same way. And then it grants you like a +2 bonus to start off with. However, it also scales with level. So at 11th level, Inspire Competence increases to +4 instead of +2. And then at 19th level, it increases to +6. So they basically just made more of their abilities scale up, which is really cool. At 10th level, they gain the Jack of all trades ability, which we'll look at here. Let me just find that one. Okay, so Jack of all trades, at 10th level, a Bard can use any skill, even if that skill normally requires him to be trained. At 16th level, a Bard considers all skills to be class skills. At 19th level, the Bard can take 10 on any skill check, even if it's not normally allowed. So there are certain skills that you can only use if you're trained in them, but with this ability, you can use that skill even if you don't have a single rank in them, and then eventually all skills are considered to be class skills. And then the ability to take 10 is actually really good as well. At 2nd level, they gain the Well-Versed ability. So the Bard becomes resistant to the bardic performances of others and to sonic effects in general. The Bard receives a +4 bonus on saving throws made against bardic performance, sonic, and language-dependent effects. So not only can they counter those effects with their music, with their Countersong ability, but they also themselves become much more resistant to them, which is, again, just a really nice evolution of the ability. Versatile performance. At 2nd level, a Bard can choose one type of perform skill. He can use his bonus in that skill in place of his bonus in associated skills. When substituting this way, the Bard uses his total perform skill bonus, including class skill bonuses in place of associated skills. So you can basically use performance in place of a different type of skill, which again is really kind of cool. The types of perform and the associated skills are act, so they can use bluff or disguise. Comedy can be used in place of bluff or intimidate. Dance can be used in place of acrobatics or fly if you had that skill. Keyboard instruments can be used in place of diplomacy or intimidate, which is interesting. Oratory can be used in place of diplomacy, sense motive, or persuasion. Persuasion can be used in place, percussion can be used in place of handle animal and intimidate. Sing can be used in place of bluff or sense motive. And wind instruments can take the place of diplomacy and handle animal, which again is really cool. They also get the lore master ability at 5th level. So at 5th level, the bard becomes a master of lore and can take 10 on any knowledge skill check that it has ranks in. A bard can choose to take 10 and can choose not to take 10 and can instead roll normally. In addition, once per day, the bard can take 20 on any knowledge skill as a standard action. He can use this ability one additional time per day for every 6 levels he possesses beyond 5th, to a maximum of 3 times per day at 17th. So that's, again, some new abilities that were added. But there were also some changes made to their music abilities. So they still, like I said, get the ones that they had before, but they also get some other cool abilities in here as well, such as the Dirge of Doom. So at 8th level, they can use their performance to foster a sense of growing dread in his enemies, causing them to become shaken. So you can actually impose that ability with the bardic music, which is really cool. They also get soothing performance, so at 12th level or higher, they can use performance to create an effect equivalent to a mass cure serious wounds, using the bard's level as the caster level. In addition, this performance removes the fatigued, sickened, and shaken conditions from all those affected. Using this ability requires 4 rounds of continuous performance, and the targets must be able to see and hear the performance throughout. So again, another cool ability that was in there that makes the bardic music, again, that much better to use. You also have the deadly performance, which is really cool. So a bard of 20th level or higher. I don't know if Pathfinder actually introduced epic levels, but anyway, it does say 20th level or higher. You can use your performance to cause one enemy to die from joy or sorrow. To be affected, they must be able to see and hear you as normal. And they have to be able to do that for 1 full round. They get a will saving throw. If they succeed, the target is staggered for 1d4 rounds, and the bard cannot use deadly performance again on that creature for 24 hours. If it fails, the target dies. It's a mind affecting ability, so anything that's immune to or resistant to mind affecting effects can will sort of resist that a little bit better. But yeah, they can actually literally use their music to snuff out somebody's life, and that's, again, it just overall just nothing but improvements on the bard class compared to the 3rd edition and 3.5 counterparts. The last thing I want to look up very quickly is just going to be their spell selection here. Again, I don't think this has changed a whole heck of a lot compared to what we had before. Their 0 level spells, again, none of them are damage dealing, but they are useful to have, and again, you're no longer limited to a set number of uses per day. So suddenly things like resistance, giving you +1 on saving throws, on basically the next save that you make. The fact that you can do that multiple times is great. Being able to cast light or lullaby, which can put the target or have them get in penalty to saves versus sleep, and negatives on the perception. The fact that that's a 0 level spell, again, is pretty awesome. As far as, like I said, damage dealing stuff goes, they still get their just looking at 2nd level selection here, so they still get their sound burst. So sound burst still deals 1d8 and can stun. At 3rd level, doesn't look like they get any attack spells or damage dealing spells at 3rd level. At 4th level, they gain Shout, which again is 5d6 Sonic. They also gain Shadow Conjuration. At 5th level, they gain Shadow Evocation and Nightmare, which again deals the d10 damage. So it doesn't look like much has changed there. At 6th level, At 6th level, it looks like they also don't. So I don't. Oh, actually, yeah. At 6th level, they get Shout Greater. So they get a greater version of Shout, which deals 10d6 sonic damage and can stun creatures. So more or less the same as far as the spell casting is concerned, or spell selection, but getting that extra like 6th level spell that can do up to 10d6 is pretty good, in addition to the increase abilities that they get from their bardic music. Like, again, at 20th level, just being able to choose someone, perform for them, and then have them potentially die is just a really, really good ability. The fact that they can use bardic music is like a cure thing. Again, it's just such a major improvement over the 3rd edition versions of the Bard. And if I had to really, play a Bard using like the 3rd edition era style, like 3rd edition 3.0, I would go with the Pathfinder one. Absolutely, it was just an absolute improvement over the classes. Now, that said, is the D20, the early D20 versions of the Bard, is it a good class to play? Well, the answer is really kind of no. Even the Pathfinder one, as good as the class is, especially compared to the 3.0 version of it, the earliest version, it's still very much stuck in that supporting role. They did make some improvements in the Pathfinder one that definitely makes it much better to look at, like the increased hit dice, the the things like Jack of all trades, their ability to add bonuses to or take 10 on any knowledge skill, stuff like that. Really good abilities. Their death song. I knew somebody that wanted to make a bard back in these days, and he never made the character, but the concept was that he was going to be a death metal singer. And I think it was the Pathfinder one that he was looking at, because he really wanted to use that Song of Death, as well as the Dirge of Doom, which just sounds like an awesome name for a song to begin with. But yeah, overall, it's definitely an interesting class to look at, but it's still just really rooted in pure support and trying to be able to fill any gap that might be in the party's makeup, while just never being able to do anything as good as any other class. It did improve from 3.0 to 3.5, and it definitely improved from 3.5 to Pathfinder. But it's still one of those classes that it's, even in the Pathfinder, 1st edition core rulebook, it's better than it was in 3.5, but it's still probably overall the weakest class in the game. So it's unfortunate that the Bard is still kind of, again, like the butt of the joke. It's the master of all, or the jack of all trades, master of none. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And we're going to see, however, that this is probably going to be the last version of the Bard for D&D that you can really say is just not worth looking at. Because in the next installment in this series, we're going to be taking a look at the Bard class in D&D 4th edition as well as 5th edition. So looking forward to that one. I also have a companion video planned for this series, which I'll probably actually do between this one and the 4th and 5th edition Bard class, where I look at some alternate class features that the Bard gains from some books for 3.5 as well as Pathfinder. We're also going to be doing the last concluding chapter of this series after I do the 4th and 5th edition D&D Bard. We're going to be taking a look at the Bard in 2nd edition Pathfinder, as well as a class heavily inspired by the Bard in Starfinder. So I'm looking forward to all those. Anyway, I know this was a longer video. I apologize for that, but I wanted to cover these 3 different versions of the game. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and let me know in the comments below. Did anybody play a Bard back in the days of 3rd edition and 3.5? Were you in a game where either you or one of the other players chose to play a Bard for 3.0, 3.5, Pathfinder 1st edition? Did the DM make one as an NPC? Did you ever encounter a Bard as an enemy? And just any other general Bard-related stories that you might have from your days or experiences with these versions of role-playing games, so D&D 3rd edition, 3.5, and Pathfinder 1st edition. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.